Welcome back to the Rethink It podcast, the Brain Health and Longevity podcast. This podcast is for those of you struggling with brain health issues and for those looking to protect your brain in the future. In this podcast, I encourage you guys to learn to be a good steward of your health. A steward is someone who cares for something that doesn't belong to them. I'm sure that you guys are going, wait a minute, my health is my own, my body is my own. But here's the thing. I believe that the body is a gift from a loving God and that we are granted the opportunity to care for it as an act of worship in our everyday life. I believe that our health is a gift as much as any other resource that we are granted in this life. Most people try not to be frivolous with their monetary resources, their time resources, or their relationship resources. I believe that our health is one of those precious resources we are called to intentionally care for during our time here on Earth. So in this podcast, I hope to give you practical, scientific, cost-effective tools to empower you to good health stewardship. Dementia rates are skyrocketing and at younger and younger ages. You guys, 35. It's outrageous. My hope is that you are able to use the information in this podcast to prevent dementia and to reverse course if you have it. It is possible. I believe the body is created with an innate intelligence given by our Creator, and because of this, it is possible to heal from even the most difficult challenges when we address the root cause and in the right order. So when we learn to use the right tools to care for our body, you can be your own best doctor. There is really hope for lasting healing. Welcome back, everybody, to the Rethink It podcast. I am so excited you guys are here with me again today to continue our conversation about brain health, protection, and longevity. I'm really excited. I know you said term a lot. I promise I really am excited to bring back one of our guests, Meg Richichi. She came and joined us on a previous podcast, the hormone episode, Rethinking the Connection Between Hormones and Brain Health. And it was such a great episode. I really hope you tuned in on that. And if you haven't, go back and listen to it. The conversation was amazing. It really did help give us a kind of a large overview of how important hormones are to brain health and longevity in particular. In fact, I feel like it's like the really important piece. Why don't you lose weight? Hormones. Why are you fatigued? Probably hormones. So hormones have a huge effect on our brain health as we age, in particularly. And a lot of times we find that as you get into that perimenopause phase, that's when your hormones start to change a lot, and it really unveils issues that maybe your estrogen has kind of covered and protected you from. So in other words, you've been dealing with chronic fatigue and other issues, but the presence of lots of normal, healthy estrogen that is evident in your 20s and early 30s goes away. That estrogen goes away, and that shield of protection that kind of helps boost your creativity and energy goes away, and it kind of unveils or reveals the fact that we actually do have this underlying issue going on. And so it's really an important conversation. We do talk about that a little bit in today's episode. So I think that's a really important thing. And I hope you guys really tune in and enjoy this conversation, eavesdropping on our conversation. Today, however, we are talking about self-care. As most of you probably know, self-care is something that is a big topic today. I mean, we have whole magazines on self-care, from everything, every topic. But when you think of self-care, what comes to mind? I mean, for me, self-care, when I thought about it, I thought, well, that's exercise, that's eating pretty good, which I didn't even know what that meant. That's maybe getting a massage once a month and, maybe having some me time. That's how I thought maybe self-care meant, what I thought it meant. But we really unpack that a little bit and even rename that term self-care in today's conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. But just to recap on who Meg is, Meg and I are very, very different. She and I met in a professional mentorship program that we did together a few years ago. And I love that she's very different than me. She has a very different perspective on the world and a very different perspective on, she comes from a different angle when viewing health. We all often agree, but her perspective is just different. So that's great for someone like me who needs to, it helps me rethink my position, helps me really think through my ideas on how we approach health and things. So everybody should have a friend that is very different than them. And Meg is my person. So I'm tickled to bring her back to you guys, but I wanted to remind you of who she is. So Meg is kind of my go-to mentor and resource for all things female hormones. So all things hormones. She is a repository of information and has lots of expertise in this area. She has been an integrative women's health practitioner for nearly 30 years and has had about that length of time clinical experience. She practiced in New York City for almost 2 decades, and she currently resides in Atlanta and provides kind of virtual telehealth services to women around the country, similar to my practice. Meg uses kind of the East meets West approach to help countless women overcome hormonal imbalances, including infertility, PCOS, PMS, weight issues, digestive issues, anxiety, and digestion. And really, her career began in health and wellness as an acupuncturist. She does currently still practice acupuncture in Atlanta. And she is definitely someone I would see. You know how you can get people who know what they're doing and people who sometimes just do it for the money. She is not that person. She's the person who knows what they're doing. So she is absolutely a wealth of resources, and I love talking to her. And I hope you'll enjoy listening to our conversation today as we cover the topic of self-care. Yay! Well, we're back. Well, thank you for coming back on, Meg. And it's been a fun morning getting just the testing done on this podcast.
Oh my gosh. We tried to do
you love technology?
Yeah, we tried to do this a few days ago and I didn't record on your end.
Yeah, so I know. Sometimes technology is just not my friend. So today we're talking about self-care and how that relates to how we view, even maybe how we view ourselves. It has so many effects on our life, how we perceive what self-care is. And it's a buzzword today. So we're going to unpack it a little bit and talk about what do we mean by self-care? So Meg, good morning. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing okay.
You and I talk about self-care a lot and
all the time.
And how much we hate that term.
Yes, we don't like self-care. Or here's the big one. Self-love.
Self-love. Yeah, there you go.
My God.
Self-love.
You have to love yourself.
Yeah.
And, Sandy and I decided to have this conversation because self-care, self-priority, putting yourself in the steering, as the driver of the car, as opposed to being in the trunk of the car. How do we make ourselves a priority in a way that allows us to become optimal and healthy?
Right.
And we're going to kind of break that down because I think a lot of times when we ask our clients to make changes in their lives, it can be really challenging, particularly when labs come back and we're seeing things like elevated numbers that could correspond to a woman not detoxing estrogen, making her more, she's at a higher risk for estrogen-related cancers like breast cancer. Mm-hmm. How do you break that down in a way to assist a woman in saying, I'd like you to make these changes in your life without making them feel so overwhelmed? Does that 100%. Make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%.
And a lot of it, and as I said to Sandy before, I really thought about this again this morning. I think that's the reason why our recording did not work out.
Yeah,
I believe that self-worth has a lot to do with self-love and being able to take care of oneself to make sometimes radical changes in our lives so that we can be healthy.
Right. I know it's one of the things I noticed in my practice is that our my clients are they're very motivated. I don't work with everybody. I am very selective of the people that I work with. And, you know, those people are usually very qualified to do the work that's involved in getting well, because it's work, it's effort. It's the same thing as I've got a plan to go, I don't know, train for a marathon. Well, if you don't run your miles during the week, you're never going to run 26.2, right? So same thing. And I noticed the pattern with my clients is that they are used to doing certain things very, very well. And I would say taking supplements, if you tell them what to do, they're going to do those supplements. They do a great job with supplements. But I find that supplements are the third thing I recommend. So in my when I do my notes on my clients, it's here's our diet recommendations, here's our lifestyle recommendations, and then here's our supplement market.
Yeah.
They're third on purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Third on purpose because that's a priority. Yeah. Those diet and lifestyle recommendations are priority over the supplements. Right. And I find my clients flip that. They take the supplements really well. But when I say, well, this week we're going to work on, avoiding certain things in our diet or changing altogether the approach we have on diet. Those things, well, I really didn't do so good on that. I didn't know that was such an important thing. It was the first thing on the list, or, getting early morning light, or just pick something lifestyle that we recommend regularly, getting to bed on time. Let's talk about that.
Well, because I think part of it is that we are in a culture that if you take a pill, it will make you better.
Right.
And that's the conventional approach. Mm-hmm. And what you and I are saying to clients, yes, supplements are important, but we've got to make sure, are you getting enough sleep? Mm-hmm. Are you getting, 30, 40 grams of protein with each meal?
30 to 40 grams of protein with each meal. That's a lot of protein, people. What does that translate to in a plate?
It's a palm of your hand.
It's a lot for the average American. So translate that into a plate.
They're so, we're so good at carbs and Doritos. I mean, you go down, I don't want to make people wrong, and I can go off on tangents. We have one aisle for meat, but we have at my supermarket 4 aisles for soda.
I know.
And then we have four aisles plus a big display, particularly during like Super Bowl season, for Doritos and chips.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not a lot, because here's something I will say, if you were to eat meat first on your plate, you will have a sense of satiety and you will not overeat.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
And that makes such a difference. Well, it really does.
Because we talked about it last time. Those proteins are so critical. We break them down into our amino acids that our body then uses to make brain power. Neurotransmitters,
balance
cell membranes.
Balance, and then we balance those with vegetables and other things. But a pill is there to supplement our lifestyle choices of what are we eating? Right. Are we digesting our food? I mean, I think the most important supplement to start with, and you agree with this, Sandy, is making sure people digest their food. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Very basic, very, very basic outline of products. So it would be a probiotic, an enzyme, or HCl supplementation.
Yeah, HCl, I think is so. Today is, at least for me, and I'm really thinking about this because you and I've been working with clients for almost 30 years, and it's like, how do you figure out to help somebody lean into making radical changes sometimes, or they never thought of, wow, if I eat breakfast with protein, this could change the course of my day. I won't be crashing at 2:00 in the afternoon. So true. I won't be binging at 5. Wow. If I start eating like Sandy and Meg recommend, my hormones are balanced. I'm going to make that a priority. And the priority is, as women say, I don't have time to cook. Well, do a good shop where you have stuff in the freezer. You can order meat from Butcher Box. There's a variety of things. So you have them there so that when you need to cook, it's in the house. And when you prepare, whatever you have for dinner can be lunch that you can bring with you the next day.
What do you think? Do you feel like it's the challenge that people have toward this concept of self-care is just because we're used to the quick fix with a pill? Or do you think there's more to that?
Oh, yes. So I will share my story, and I'll share a few. One of the reasons that I got into women's health is that in my teens and my 20s, I had an eating disorder. I was anorexic, and then I became bulimic. And then I started going, my journey, my recovery, working with a good functional medicine doctor. This is the early 80s. I was really, so many of his recommendations today, spot on. Right. I worked with the nutritionist. I had one of the top eating disorder therapists. I was living in New York City. And, oh, by the way, I was a very successful consultant art director. So outwardly, I looked like I had my shit together. Inwardly, I was just falling apart. It was bad. And I remember my therapist saying to me after being in therapy for, I guess, a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And she said, the next time you want to binge and purge, I want you to sit with what you feel. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I said, I don't know how to do that. She said, I'm here to help you do that. We're going to learn how to sit with what you feel so you can discern. Later on, I realized, how can I discern between a physical hunger and an emotional hunger? How can I be aware that my feelings are valid? I grew up in a house. There was abuse. It was crazy town. There was mental illness.
Children. And 1 million children.
And I was one of 10 kids. Now, I'm not going to start blaming, but, there comes a point where I had to make different choices to give myself the love that I did not get growing up because it just was not available. It was a dysfunctional house. And I had to learn, like, wow, how do I take care of myself? I want to share the sandwich story because I think it's really good. So I heard 3 different versions of the sandwich story. And I'll start with the sandwich story. So I was listening to Dr. Mark Hyman this morning, who was having an interview with Dr. Sarah Gottfried. I adore them both. They're functional medicine people. They're really, really great. And he was saying, he too had grown up in a house where there was a lot of disconnect, not having needs met, just wasn't. He didn't have a sense that he was worthy of things. He was taking care of everyone else. That's what doctors do. So he had just gotten divorced, and he was sitting at a friend's house, and she said, "May I make you a sandwich?" And he started to cry because he wasn't used to someone actually saying. He said he never had anyone say, "Can I make you a sandwich?" I have a friend, and his daughter, he was, going through a difficult separation with his partner, and they had a daughter. And the little one said to me at one point, I knew my father loved me because I was at my mom's house, and he went into the kitchen to make her a sandwich. And she said, that's when I realized how much my father loved me. And then I listened to this other tale of Mary Tyler Moore, that her husband was a doctor, and I think he was at the house, and he went to make her a sandwich. And she realized in that moment that she loved him. Now, I don't know. These are just
interesting,
basic
sandwich stories, and
but it's love. True. There's just something about the love of cooking.
There is. That's so true.
Preparing food. Sitting down at a table with others, or even for ourselves, because I believe that food defines a culture, and it brings people together. 100%. And I think one of the most sacred things that we can do is take the time to prepare a meal for ourselves, or prepare a meal for a family. But food is nourishing. It nourishes the body, mind, and spirit.
There's more to that. And you said it just now. There's more to that story. what I picked up.
Oh,
The act is, it's not just the food and the sandwich, but it's the taking of the time
it's the
to
action.
Serve
yeah.
Another person.
Or being served. I have a hard time with that.
And the feeling of being served is so loving. Think about grandma's house.
Yeah.
You sit around, if you had a grandma that did this, and I only had one of two that really did this, that you go to grandma's house and she's going to cook and she's going to bake, and you're going to just sit there and enjoy the fruits of her labor while enjoying her while she's doing it. Right. Yeah. That's an amazing gift. And I felt you feel love. It's just a child feels loved in their grandmother's house when they're cooking for them. Right.
So, so getting back to the, having the eating disorder and learning the recovery of the, recovering, it was a journey. How could I be comfortable in my own body? How could I be okay with putting on weight that was solid and healthy? And I mean, my life changed, and I felt this commitment. I decided to make a career change in my mid-30s after coming out of healing from bulimia. I still had some body dysmorphia in my 30s until my 40s. Everyone, it's not like, oh, you just stop. I had to little by little feel comfortable in my own body. So I get it. Yeah. When I ask women to lean into creating changes that are uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable in the deepest sense.
Yes. Yeah.
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 So and do you feel like that is part of why there's such a resistance? Because we start challenging kind of a deeper self-worth issue, or do you think there's more?
Is it partially cultural for a lot of women? I think a lot of women that I see, it's like they take care. You're a mom, you know this. Yeah. You take care of everyone else, but how do you, in that, make sure that you're taking care of yourself? And I
think of culturally what is non-verbally elevated as the highest moral thing, right? One of the highest moral things is to be selfless. And that translates into every area of your life. I mean, in my job, it's skip lunch so that so that we don't burden the staff, because there's limited staff and da. So you're considered a good employee if you skip lunch or try to get it in 10 minutes. Think about being a mom. Like it's just a nonverbal statement, like among even mom groups, that, hey, look at all this stuff I'm doing. I'm giving up this. I'm doing all this for my kids. And it's that elevation of this sense that selflessness is good. And I am not opposed to selflessness. I'm a Christian, so I think that selflessness is a good thing in some ways, but in other ways, like your health, this is where it becomes a question of, how am I actually serving well when I don't take care of myself as a priority? So back to the self-priority thing.
Well, it's a giving and receiving in life. How much am I willing? What is healthy giving, or as you call selfless service? And what is healthy receiving?
Well, and how can you truly give well if your needs, your physical and mental, emotional needs are not met? I mean, I've been there, and it's not a pretty picture. I have tried to push through, soldier, with an empty cup, and I just make a mess. I make a mess every time. So.
And it's one of the reasons why I feel women today are going through a hellacious perimenopause. For some women starting in their late 30s and starting in their early 40s, because they're burnt out. We're burning out our hormones for a variety of reasons. So that is why it is so, how can we prioritize that taking care of ourselves is the number one thing to do to allow ourselves to heal. And it's uncomfortable because we're not in a culture that allows it. I'd like to share a story. I have a client who I've been working with on and off for the past few years. I'll see her, and then she comes back 6 months later and comes back months later. And I would meet with her and say, I'd like you to do these things. I'd like you to take these supplements. I'd like you to do these. Follow these lifestyle recommendations. Okay, Meg. And then we get together months later. Did you do it? No. So this person has terrible anxiety and panic. And this is true. This happened recently in the past few months. And we realized, I started asking her more about childhood and her birth. She said, I almost died in childbirth. I had trauma at birth. I was in the hospital. Yeah. And she had all this panic.
It was fight or flight at a neonatal stage. Fight or flight right at birth.
So guess what happened? So I said, I love that you're doing therapy, but I said, you may want to work with somebody that does deeper trauma to kind of unwind this. Because I had the same thing happen with
craniosacral therapy.
What?
Craniosacral therapy.
Yes. And I had so anyway, what happened with this, or acupuncture?
Oh yeah.
Which I do.
Plug for that.
After we got off that call, she had an epiphany. She said, I realized that I was not taking care of myself. So I hadn't seen her in 6 weeks. She said, I am doing every single thing you've told me, and I am leaning in 1,000%, and my life is changing because now I understand what it means to make myself a priority in my health. So I don't want to give away too much because I don't want to say too much. She's taking her supplements. She had to take medication. She had a bunch of things. She actually is getting off her anxiety medication. She just dropped it by 75%. I'm like, how are you? She said, I'm doing great. She said, I feel so good. She said, I feel empowered and in control of my life. So something flipped. She said, and I really got it. But getting back to anxiety, I had a client years back, terrible panic attacks. And when during birth, the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck, and she always felt like she was choking. And she did cranial sacral work, and it actually changed that.
Yes, 100%. So true. I talked about, that's a real thing that, and let's just talk about ADHD for a second. It's so common to be diagnosed with ADHD. I see it in adults still. I mean, it's just crazy. And there are studies that show that there's a really high percentage. I want to say it's like 60% or something like that had something traumatic like that at birth with a nuchal cord is what we call when the umbilical wraps around the neck.
Right.
That's how does that affect the brain? Well, anoxia, and then fight or flight. You prime the baby at birth to be in fight or flight, and that's going to be, when you're in fight or flight, you're hyper vigilant. You can't focus on one thing; you're focusing on everything. So that's a real thing.
Have you heard of the ACE score?
No, yes.
The ACE score is a bunch of questions they ask to see what kind of trauma you had growing up. Right. And how this trauma actually puts you at risk for autoimmune disorders and other health issues. Yeah.
So, I will never forget when I stumbled across another study. This was before I really understood the role of trauma and autoimmunity. So I would say it was probably 10 years ago I read this study. And this before my son got sick with Lyme. It was just crazy. But I had another friend that was sick with Lyme, and it was sort of a novelty for me that somebody could be chronically sick with Lyme. I was like, huh. And so I was doing research, and this study showed that something like 80% of those who have chronic neuroborreliosis or neurologic Lyme have had some form of trauma in their early life before the age of 20. That's a really high statistic. That shows huge. The impact. It makes sense, right? Because you get trauma as a child, stress response, immune system drops, and now we have we're just walking around with this extra. We're just primed for getting sick, chronically ill.
Yeah. I mean, what we're exposed to, like illness, I mean, what you're describing, but also if you've grown up in a house where there's a lot of physical abuse and you don't know if you're going to be like, if you're coming or going, if you're living, I mean, I lived in a perpetual fight or flight and learning how to do a reset on that. And I mean, that's where the therapy comes in, but I'm still kind of wired for that. You work on PTSD, but if you've had things, it's like, oh yeah. And I have to remember, be kind, be kind. And I think all of us, it's how do we find that place within ourselves to say, I'm going to do something differently. And I'm seeing Meg, or I'm seeing Sandy, and Sandy's asking me to make these changes. Well, what I'm doing right now isn't working. So Sandy's asking me to make changes. Wow, they make me feel kind of uncomfortable. What do you mean I have to take some time and do some breathing exercises in the morning? What, 11 minutes? No. Can I do it for 5? No, I want you to do it for 11 minutes. What do you mean I can't go to bed with my phone and have it next to my head as I go to sleep? This is true.
No, I know. These are the things that
these are the
things that people push back on. And we were just talking about that. Like, we flip that.
I'm just like this. I say the most important thing, the number one priority I have for people is you have to prioritize sleep.
100%.
Because if you're getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep, or you have this stupid thing in your bedroom, I turn off my phone at night. I don't care if the world blows up. I unplug my Wi-Fi. I don't care, because I'll figure it out within the next 12 hours when I wake up, or after I turn my phone off at like 7:30. I can't. The whole day I'm on.
Correct.
And
that's such a...
It's too much. But at night, how do we... I say to people, please get the TV out of the bedroom. I feel the bedroom is a very sacred place. It is for sleep, reading books, and having sex with your partner, or if you live alone.
It should be. It's your safe domain. My husband always made fun of me because I would be like, get the kids out of here. And stop bringing their stuff in here. This is my sanctuary.
That's your sanctuary.
Like, this is your room. If my world is chaotic, if every bit of the house is a disaster, I don't want my sanctuary a disaster. It needs to be a place where my mind is mentally relaxing and not getting stressed out by that. But so
that is a great win for people. You can do it. And I've said to people, you're getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep. Do you get up in the morning exhausted and go to the gym? Yeah, but I got to get my workout in. I said, no, your exercise, your routine this week, I want you to sleep. You need to get that 8-9 hours of sleep. And you can't cheat sleep. You can't do it on the weekends. If you do it consistently, guess what starts happening? You're sharper at work. You may start leaning out. You have more energy to do things, and life changes. So that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. It's an uncomfortable change in the lifestyle. And so that I find, chime in and let me know what you think. But what I think a lot of times is that because self-priority is radically changing the way you live your life.
Oh God, yeah.
It is.
There is no priority.
That's where the resistance is coming. I'm like, well, no, I don't want you to stay out with your friends till midnight. I don't want you to, drink alcohol and eat and then go to bed. No, I don't want you to get up after 6 hours of sleep, drink a bunch of coffee, and get on your phone. What are the habits? Yeah. I think that's a big question. Like, what are the habits you easily culturally developed that now you have to work to undo, because it's just easy to continue the way you're doing?
Because we live in a culture that is constantly doing. We have not cultivated a state of being. So what is a state of being? It's allowing yourself to go for a walk. It's allowing yourself to do a breathing exercise. It's, if you have the possibility, allowing yourself to do an infrared sauna or just sit in the park. or take a hot bath by yourself. Quiet the mind, quiet the mind. Breathing, and I don't know if I said this here, breathing is, your breath is the most intimate relationship you will ever have is with your breath. It is the first thing you take in, and it's the last thing you let go before you leave this world. So when we connect to our breathing and our breath, it centers us. It allows us to have more clarity in hearing our inner voice. It allows us to connect spiritually to what allows us to be nourished. We have to quiet the mind because this busyness is actually, it's like being a little mouse and running on those little, crazy wheel.
The crazy wheel.
And in Chinese medicine, yang is what am I doing in the world? How am I being in the world? Yin is allowing myself to sit back. Yin is that restorative time. I don't want to pull away from the mic, where I allow myself to sleep, where I allow my brain to heal and detox, where I allow myself to have recovery. And it's also, yin is a time where I go for a walk. I sit. I sit under a tree. These things really ground us. We're not grounded.
No, we're not.
Walking on the sand or on the grass, may it not be pumped with pesticides, but grounding your feet in Mother Earth, it's not woo-woo. It grounds you.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So I think this conversation is, there are things that we want you to do, but it comes from a state of allowing, which is allowing yourself to be. Wow, I'm going to take a step back. And maybe in the beginning it is a doing, but then after a while you realize, wow, being in the kitchen is not bad, cutting up veggies and making dinner.
Actually, that's another way of grounding with the earth.
Oh yeah, you're touching
Let me
fruits
tell
and
you, vegetables in your hand, the
It's
smell, aromatics.
All those herbs, so calming.
I mean,
so
we might like cooking here, but and I know not everybody does. But there's
and that's something that I think what is it that so many people don't like cooking? What happened along the way? Because in other cultures, 100 years ago, you could not go to McDonald's.
Everybody comes over and cooks together. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You had to cook. Otherwise, you didn't eat. So how can we celebrate life? Food is medicine. The first supplement for you is what you put in your mouth and what you chew, all the vegetables that you eat, all the protein, all the fruits, the nuts. We were meant to chew our foods, not drink it down in all these protein shakes. That's another story.
Yeah, the protein shakes.
Can I do this on the go? Can I eat my lunch, my breakfast as I'm going to work? I'm like, unless you want to crash into a truck.
I mean, let's talk about that, because I know a lot of people who do that. Yeah. Like they eat on the go. And why is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Well, my analogy is, if you're trying to, when you have a meal, your body wants to be in a parasympathetic state. If you're driving or you're sitting in front of the computer and you're having a business call with someone, you've shut that down. So it's equivalent to you're going into a sympathetic response. And what happens, it's equivalent to it's equivalent to you washing your clothes in the dryer. It's not going to happen. So one of the first things that you and I see is that people have, I have indigestion. I have gas or bloat. Because it impacts the stomach it impacts our digestion.
So I'm just going to nerd out, because that's my approach, because some people listening probably are used to me nerding out. But, when you're in your parasympathetic state, first of all, your digestive system does not move. Fight or flight means we're ready for response. And parasympathetic means we're resting and digesting, meaning that our digestive system is moving forward. It's releasing the necessary enzymes from the pancreas to break food down. It is releasing relaxation hormones, and it is allowing the liver to do its job of detoxification. So when we eat, if we're not in parasympathetic, You're not eating, you're not releasing enzymes. Your gut is not moving forward. It's not propelling forward. If you're in fight or flight, it's literally stopped, So yes, food just sits there and we have a heartburn and indigestion when we eat in a fight or flight. And the fight or flight could be, it's just classic, like eating in the 10-minute break in between something at work, 10 minutes, the driving to work, driving on the highway, Why? Because when you're driving, you're vigilant. You're hopefully you're vigilant, looking out for other cars because other cars are idiots, right? And you're going to get a crash. So you're not resting while you drive. It's not relaxing unless you're just on your Sunday morning drive in the country or something, So yeah, so you're setting yourself up for a failure there. I find that I have to intentionally do that because I'm busy. I have 5 children. I run a clinic and I work, in the hospital. And so I have to sit. If I only have 10 or 15 minutes, well, I might eat a portion of my meal, but I'm going to sit, calm down, relax, and enjoy my food. And I might only eat a portion because I'm going to make sure to chew my food, 40 to 50 times until it's mush. And if that takes time, so I won't get the whole meal in, but I will take the intentionality of relaxing at my meal, even if it is only 10 minutes long. So that's something I do as a busy person. It's not perfect. The perfect situation would be to really take the 30, 45 minutes to relax, enjoy, sit, calm, and before and after your meal. But I understand busy.
So can I show the analogy of what happens when people get heartburn and indigestion?
Yeah.
Can I show I did this on Instagram last week and on TikTok. Mm-hmm. This is your stomach.
For those on the YouTube only, we've got a empty glass of water.
Oh, okay. So what I have here is, that's right, YouTube, if it's a podcast. Yeah. Imagine I have a glass of water. Uh-huh. So you're eating food. It travels down into the esophagus. Yeah. And there's a valve called the LES between the stomach and the esophagus. Mm-hmm. And it's a flap. It's like the lid of a washer. Mm-hmm. So the stomach will register, oh, I have enough stomach acid. I'm going to shut that valve. Well, guess what happens? For a lot of people, that valve does not shut. Mm-hmm. And you have this stomach acid that's spewing up into the esophagus, giving you heartburn. Mm-hmm. And why is that? You're on the go. Your body's not producing enough stomach acid.
You're on proton pump inhibitors.
And then your doctor puts you on a PPI, a proton pump inhibitor, which neutralizes your stomach acids even more, leaving you susceptible to getting things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, maybe constipation, parasites. You need stomach acid to digest your food, but also it helps to kill any potential bacteria or pathogens that could be traveling further through digestion. So I bring that up. Here's sleep is important. Making sure that when you eat, you're in a peaceful state. And maybe somebody will make you a gluten-free sandwich.
Yeah.
With a lot of love, and a lot of protein, and avocado and greens.
Yeah.
And you're feeling that love coming through as you eat. But I feel that for so many people, and this is the self-care, the self-priority, how does it start? It starts with the fact that you are worthy of abundance. You are worthy of having abundant health. You are worthy of abundance in all areas of your life. And how do we allow that to happen? By allowing ourselves to be open to receiving. And part of that receiving is also giving ourselves the nourishment that we need, the sleep, the walks, the food, and dialing it back. And that's a start. I mean, there's so much. And maybe if it's really difficult, you're like, I can't do this. Yeah. Counseling, therapy is a great thing. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're feeling so I've done a lot of therapy over the years. If you're feeling so overwhelmed and you don't know how to manage it, you don't have to do it by yourself. You're not a failure if you seek out guidance. It could be a coach,
Yep.
It could be a therapist.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't matter. We all need some guidance and help along the way, right, Sandy?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's a big thing. Like another thing that we don't like to do is say,
I need help.
I need help.
Yeah.
I'm struggling. I need help. I think that's foreign to our vocabulary, especially those, a lot of us, especially the podcast listeners, those people are wanting to learn and grow and become better. These people are people that are prone to do it on my own. I'm gonna do it. I can do it. If I have enough information, I can do it. And if they somehow fail in doing so,
or people
that's somewhat wrapped in their identity, right? And then I'm a failure, and they don't know how to say I need help.
Or people start doing something.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help people continue? They'll do something for 6 weeks and then they stop.
Yeah.
That's where you and I come in. We're having those check-ins.
Oh yeah.
We help people be accountable. That's where therapy is important at times. It keeps people accountable. So then you get to that point where you can be accountable fully for yourself.
Yes.
I never, when I had an eating disorder, I never thought I would ever get be able not to purge or to look at myself and be okay in my own body.
Yeah,
I never thought I could do that.
Same.
And I'm very blessed that I had really good therapists that were loving, and some really called me out of my shed. And I was like, okay, I have to be accountable here with love. Sometimes that tough love is important, but I feel very
truth is really important.
Yeah, I feel blessed. So that's why if I'm working with someone who's struggling in whether they're 100 pounds overweight or they're underweight, I get I understand how food can be an obstacle for people, and how we can eat in a way, and not just the way we eat, but how we look at ourselves, how we love ourselves, how about we can, this is going off. How do we set boundaries to say, I'm really tired. I can't meet up with you tonight. I love you. Or somebody calls you and you really don't want to get together with them because they suck all the energy out of the room or the air. And it's like,
yeah, I don't have enough to give. Right
I can't. Yeah. And if I can just share, last year I had been working on a really big project with another fitness person, and I was really excited about it. And I was spending all this time because I thought we were going to do some amazing things. And for a variety of reasons, it just wasn't a good fit. And I spent, about 8-9 months in the project. And then I decided it was not a good fit. And then I had lost a brother last summer, and I had shoulder surgery. And I was like, I am really burnt out. And it all happened within a matter of a few months. So for a few months, until the past month, I was like, I didn't want to be on social media. I didn't want to do anything extra in my life. I was emotionally and physically and creatively burnt out.
100%.
I was so burnt out, and I thought, oh shit, how am I gonna get that mojo back? And I just needed like 4 months to just be. So
and that's the thing, like even on podcasts, this podcast, there was a good break here between just January and February. I didn't do much, but that's because you and I are honest about our needs. And, this is a one-man show on my side. So, I will have to dial it back in order to honor and love my family, to fill back up and restore my physical, mental, emotional health before I can be creative, like you said. And then when something as tragic as the loss of a family member happens, it really takes a lot out of your.
Well, you were really there for me, and I want to share with the audience. I had lost my brother in August, and then I came home, and in a couple of days, I was feeling like I was getting sick, and it was all in my chest. And I was at my sister's when we found out about my brother. It was very, very sudden. And I got home And I hadn't cried. I didn't know how to cry because it was such a sudden thing. He was hit by a car and it was like, he was gone. And you were on the phone with me. And I remember coming into my house and sitting on the floor in my bedroom, and I just wept. And the lungs are about grief, but also what happened, 2 days later, I got COVID again. I had my, and it knocked me out. I slept for days, but everything just landed in my chest. And grief is, you know, I had to release those tears, and I had to give myself that time. But it's amazing how my body responded to such a loss. My immune system just kicked in, but you were there for me, and you said, it's okay, let it go. Now I'm going to get choked up. You were really there in a way that I needed. And I think that what's important for people, it's okay to be vulnerable with others and allow them to hold the space for you.
Yeah. Well, I think you default into what your pain responses or something like that. I don't know if that's even intelligent sounding, but like you default to self-protection. Hold it. And so when you're given sort of a reminder that you have permission to grieve, there's a lot going on here. Cry, grieve, lament. That is just enormous. I've seen that a lot in my practice. I feel like a lot of people want to do the do. They want to do the do. They want to move forward. They want to step forward. But allowing a moment and a time to spend grieving the fact that life shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't be this sick. I'm disappointed in the loss of dreams and hopes and the way I thought life was going to be. It's okay to grieve that. And it's like actually an important step in your healing. Like I do that with clients a lot, and it's the hardest season of their journey in healing is, okay, this month, I want you to spend time recognizing what your grief is on this subject, whatever the subject is, you know, wherever they are. Recognizing and pray and lament and spend time grieving it. Yeah. And those months are hard for people. They sometimes don't make a whole lot of progress physically, but when they step into their next stage, they're lighter. Their burden is a lot more lifted. They have a different perspective on the world because they have had the time and permission. Somebody said it's okay, because the world's not going to tell you it's okay to grieve, or they're going to put a timeline on it. You know, think about how many times.
Over it yet? You're over it when you're over it. But I love that you said that. Giving yourself, taking this time, allowing someone to say to you, and that is what, you know, I'm giving you permission to dial it back. I'm giving you permission to get off the merry-go-round of life and just sit. And feel your grief, and it's okay. And you can cry. I mean, there are times, you know, you feel like you're going to cry forever. Sometimes you just got to cry.
Yeah, it's huge.
And it doesn't mean that your life falls apart, but you give your permission. You give yourself that permission. And again, if the grief is too difficult, this is where counseling comes in. This is important. You know, we don't have to do everything by ourselves. You know, that's why we have health practitioners like us, and that's why there are good therapists out there, and they're you know, good ministers out there, and there are good spiritual teachers out there. You know, you don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to isolate in your grief. You don't have to isolate in your life. You don't have to like prove that you're the best by doing.
Or hide the grief away. Grief is a natural form, and just
shove it down.
Yeah. Grief is a natural form of life. I think that we as a culture, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it either. We as a culture don't know how to handle other people's grief. And it makes us uncomfortable because we want to fix it. We want them to be somehow perfectly happy, healthy, and it's just not realistic. You can't just fix grief. You have to sit with it, and being on the side that is not the one that's grieving, but watching someone grieve it can be a helpless feeling, but it's good too, because the reality that we have some degree of helplessness in fixing people is a good thing. It's a humbling thing. And it teaches us to be compassionate and patient.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we don't know what to say to someone who's going through a difficult time, I love you. I'm here for you. And if you need anything, I'm just a call away or a cup of coffee away. Sometimes we don't, it's not even about us, providing some
miracle medicine.
Yeah. Cause sometimes it's funny. I was talking to my brother, Matt, he lives in Covington, Louisiana. And he said to me, I realize with my wife and you women, cause I've got like 3 other sisters and I have 6 brothers. He said, I really get it. Sometimes he said, all you want to do is vent. You need to vent. And he said, that's okay. And then you can talk about whatever it is, but we need to vent. Yeah. We don't always need somebody to give us advice and tell us how to fix it. So I just thought that was great because his wife was going through something. And he said, I just got to let her vent and get it all out. He said, women need that. 100%. Men need it too. But I love that he understood that it's not about fixing. Good for you, Matt.
True. Yeah. All right. That's so true. So kind of wrapping things up, we really covered the gamut here, but the takeaway I feel like is I want you to, and I think this is what I heard from you, is that instead of viewing self-care as this nebulous thing like that you don't even know where to put your finger on, maybe replacing that term with a self-prioritization, self-priority would be a better way for you to wrap your head around what we mean, because self-priority doesn't mean you are being egotistical. It doesn't mean you are being selfish. It means that you are filling your necessary cup. You are prioritizing yourself enough so that you can love others better. Like you can be a better servant if your cup is filled. Self-priority is really important. I think it's maybe a better term. I love that you said that. And self-care, because self-care sounds like do. Go work out, go eat, go, go do. That's more work. Self-priority captures more of what we just talked about.
And what it boils down to is, how are you being a good mother to yourself? How are you being to the child within you that just does not want to do it? I'm not doing this. But how can you provide that nurturing? It's really, I think the celebration of life is, how do we learn how to be good moms to ourselves so that we can give birth to a newer version of who we are? And there's going to be hiccups along the way. That's okay.
Yeah.
Not, perfection, doing the best you can in the moment is really what perfection is. Just do the best you can and lean in. It gets uncomfortable. You're supposed to be uncomfortable. It's called, you're on the verge of a breakthrough because it's new and it's different and it's not familiar. It's like dating somebody new and you're like, oh, there are certain things I love about you, but there are other things I'm not sure yet. Well, right. And then you're like, and then after a while you're with him, you're like, oh my God, he or she is wonderful.
Yeah. That's true.
A lot of benefits from making oneself
a priority. It makes it makes the process of recovery so much easier when you self-prioritize. You will more naturally take your supplements. You will more naturally start to choose better, instead of just, without the idea of prioritizing yourself, choosing a different type of meal and choosing a bedtime and things like that seem more like a chore. But when you put it in the context of, this is because I'm prioritizing my health, myself, I'm prioritizing myself so I can go be a better employee, be a better mother, be a better spouse. I have to do these things. That becomes a little bit, it makes it less of a burden. I feel like it's just a more natural way of stepping into a different lifestyle and a healthier one overall.
Sounds
But
good.
yeah, so thank you for coming in and having this really great conversation. This is a good one.
There go the blowers again. They're on like every podcast, either my own or someone else's.
Oh, I can't hear them because we have the nice noise cancellation. But yeah, you're in Georgia and it's pollen season.
I'm in Atlanta.
And we're just now, I think we're going skiing this weekend.
I can't hear you. Hold on one sec.
We don't have pollen here yet in Colorado. In April? So April,
I literally could not hear you.
That's okay. We're not yet there with pollen in April, but
it's bad. It's bad here.
Yeah, I'm skiing one more time this weekend, and then it's probably going to start stably getting warmer. I doubt we'll have any more major spring blizzards like we had last month. But anyway. So thank you for coming on, Meg. It was really great conversation. Hopefully a lot of people got some blessing and benefit out of this conversation, maybe feel a little bit more convicted towards self-priority. And hopefully we'll get you back on here to talk about other things in the next few months. I love it.
I would love to come back and talk about estrogen dominance.
Yes, that's something we need to talk about
because that's a big issue for women. And would love to share some lovely gems with them. Good.
Oh, I'd love it. Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So that's all we've got for today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this great podcast on self-priority. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Be well.